In this episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks, big, bodacious 61 terabytes hard drives, SSDs, Radeon Pro, pro-vis cards, folding phone goodness, and more. Next. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, to another fine episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks live stream by gum. Yes, we are going to be talking about a very large solid state drive, not a hard drive. It's, believe it or not, solid state has gotten to the point of critical mass, you might say. But we got lots of things to talk about, from everything from the desktop and workstation to the data center and your pocket. So there you go. Stick around. The fun will ensue shortly. First, let's talk with our esteemed co-hosts. Marco Chiappetta, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing okay. Thank God it's Friday, though.
TGIF. And Chris is esteemed as well. We don't know what he's esteemed in, but I'm told he's esteemed. How you doing, Chris?
Good, though. I should have gotten a steaming hot cup of coffee before this, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I've been steamed all week, but not for good reasons necessarily. Hey, but it is Friday, and that's, I'm glad we moved the show to this slot because I really like Fridays. It gives you that sort of, everybody loves Friday, right? It just puts you in that good frame of mood. So, Marco, you can cheer up a little bit. I know Marco, what's that?
I'm good. No complaints.
You good? All right. I know Marco had a little issue with his puppy. Mac got a little nip on her ear, and that's no fun. And I'm sorry to hear that, but your fur baby is on the mend, and she's still okay, and that's good.
Sleeping next to me in her cone right now.
Oh, the cone of shame! I hate that.
Yeah.
I remember that with my dogs. Yogi used to get into it with all kinds of varmints, and one time he met a woodchuck. And let's just say that woodchuck got the better of him.
Yeah, woodchucks are mean.
Oh yeah, he wanted to kill it, so it decided I'm gonna fight for my life, and boy did it mess him up. He took like 15 stitches to the face, and poor dog.
Yeah.
Cone of shame for a long time there. Chris, no cone of shame for you though, right?
No, I've managed to avoid that so far.
That's good. At any rate, lots going on. What do you guys have on the burner? I am currently idle, but looking at a couple of interesting things. One of which we'll talk about, the Alienware Aurora R16, which looks interesting. But what you got cooking over there, Marco?
Testing is done. That's the although we're going to talk about some pro-vis Radeon cards in this cast. We're going to talk about the W7500 and W7600. This is the Big Daddy W7900 with 48 gigs of video memory on here. This thing is a beast, and thanks to Chris, I was able to also test it alongside an RTX A6000, and it crushes the RTX A6000 like 80% of the time. So that review is coming next from me. It's already in the CMS. Just have to write it. And yeah, we got a bunch of SSDs in, but I think I'm going to test them and send them out to the guys. We have a Seagate's latest PCIe 5 SSD and ADATA's latest actively cooled PCIe 5 SSD. Got the pictures done on those. Just got to plug them into the test rig. Yeah, so that's all on the back burner. And I promise this week I'm shooting a build video with Xeon W. That's getting done if I have to shut out the rest of the world.
That would be cool. I want to see that, and I'm sure that.
Yeah, we got sponsored from Enermax, so I have a beautiful Enermax case, an Enermax liquid cooler, an Enermax power supply, a board from ASUS, a couple of Xeon Ws. I might have sprung for a bunch of DDR5 RAM. It's gonna be nice.
And that might be your next workstation rig. Might.
I would never run a 56 core Xeon for. Yeah, it's going to be my next rig.
Yes, it is.
As long as it can run Left 4 Dead 2.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. Left 4 Dead. I don't know if Left 4 Dead 2. It's not that it's getting buggier as time goes on, but it's such a, Left 4 Dead 2 is one of those games that's like a power virus now, because frame rates are like 600 frames per second on a high-end rig. So once your system gets a little dusty, a little older, like my current rig, it starts overheating and acting funny. So I hope it runs well on a really modern rig. We'll see.
Does it actually use multiple threads, or is it still single thread era?
It's still single thread error, but
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking GPU power virus. Like it's high frame rate that it's just it runs hot.
56 core Minesweeper though, dude. Think about it.
That game makes me want to smash stuff. I never got good at Minesweeper.
I know. You and me both. But I mean, I don't know what you need.
Is it still on Windows 11?
For. I don't know. Maybe. Let me look.
Nope, it's not.
Right here. No, it's not. Oh no. Minecraft came up.
I'm sure it's out there in the store or something.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, that's good. Chris, you're idle too, and we're going to load you up very soon, right?
I was going to say, I'm getting ready for a trip, maybe 2. And so I picked up myself a base model XPS 13 a couple weeks ago to have something better to travel with. And I was thinking about running that through some games, because it's got the Intel Arc A370M in it, the real base level GPU, but it still has some game in it. So I'm curious to test it out and see exactly what you can run on such a really battery and light workload performance optimized GPU. So
I think you should do that. Yeah, a little quick hit benchmark gauntlet on it would be cool for sure. And it's 13th gen, Intel 13th gen, I imagine.
Yeah, it's the i7 13700H, I believe.
Perfect.
Perfectly reasonable CPU. And then just seeing what the graphics can add to it. So
way cool. Way cool. All right, well, let's move into the headlines, the quick hits, and then we'll get to some meaty, deep review stuff from the illustrious Marco. He's got that big fat SSD and some Radeon Pro stuff we're going to talk about. But let's talk about some of the headlines. Samsung Galaxy Z Flip5 and Z Fold5 hands-on. Miriam Joie, the illustrious Miriam Joie, has covered them for us. She did a little bit of hands-on, sort of an unboxing, if you will. This was out in Seoul, Korea, at Unpacked Korea. And there you have it, the Z Flip5 and the Z Fold5. There is a dual review in process now, so stick around. You'll get our full thoughts on this. But Samsung continues to refine the folding phone, and they have had 5 iterations at it now. Or thereabouts. And I tell you, it's getting better and better. This is interesting. The hinge now on the Fold, that's the Flip. The hinge on the Fold now is a little bit cleaner. Folds flat. There's no gap when you shut the phone. So a little bit more pocketable as a result of that. You're getting the latest Snapdragon chip, Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 on there. And the usual solid camera chops, but more iterative in nature, a little bit larger, as you can see, cover displays for making it more useful to use the device without opening it up. Any thoughts on these fellas? And are you excited for the folding phone era? Because it really seems to be kicking into gear between Samsung and Motorola, and now Google. We'll talk about the Pixel Fold as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, I love big phones. I'm not jazzed for either. Like if I were to get either, it would be the Flip, but it's so thick when it's folded. It's like a fat wallet. Like I just think of Costanza in Seinfeld when the wallet's ready to explode in his back pocket.
Exactly.
And the Z Fold, it's again too thick for me. And when it's open, like it's just kind of awkward. So I still need convincing on the foldables. These, though, I think even though they are iterative, definitely moves in the right direction. Getting rid of the gap between the hinges, getting that nice bigger screen on the front of the Flip. Just the general advancements that come with time with the software to better take advantage of the dual screens. So obviously it's a safe bet, even though we're not done with the full reviews. These are the best foldables yet. But I still need convincing personally. I like my candy bars.
Chris, you a foldable guy?
I think Marco said just about everything I was going to. It's an interesting trick. And I know there's some people like Ryan and Miriam, who really love their foldable phones.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just
I think
not there yet for me.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Flip, I think there's certainly a case to be made for certain types of users that want to have a little bit more compact, vertical. Like that thing fits in a purse real easy, and I could see the ladies, loving that thing because obviously it's a beautiful, elegant design. It's kind of cool. So it about the size of a compact. You just drop it in your purse and away you go. I could see the market for that for sure. The big foldable, I guess if you're a power user, and Samsung has done a better job these days with enabling multi-app, real estate usage of the screen. In multitasking on it. So, there's definitely some utility there. I'm still of the pocketable phone variety, or the candy bar variety that doesn't reside so fat in your pocket. I don't like the extra bulk, but if you like the screen real estate, there's the Fold there. That thing gets mighty large when you open it up. Let's see if Miriam can do it with one hand. I don't know if she's gonna do it now or not, but where we are in this video. But it's good stuff from Samsung. They led the charge. They have continued to refine and innovate in the space, and really, have made it a mass market, product now. Before it was kind of a high end. These devices were kind of a high end, almost experiment, really, when they first came out. And now they're like, okay, we're not going to have as high a failure rate on the displays and things like that. And the kinks are working out. So good stuff. Check that out. We will have a review up probably next week, I would believe. She did take those phones home from Korea, and as soon as she gets readjusted to the time change and get some time with it on the review cycle, we'll have that up shortly. And then the review we did put up today, we might as well step to that since we just talked about folding phones. That is the Google Pixel Fold. The good folks at Google have jumped in. I'm going to drop this link in the chat. I should have dropped the other one in the chat too, but here's Ryan Whitwam's Google Pixel Fold review, a foldable Galaxy rival with trade-offs. And as you can see here, this is very much like the Z Fold in that it's a horizontal fold that gives you much more screen real estate when you open it up. But it's a little different. It's much thinner than the Z Fold 5, but it doesn't quite open 100% or 180 degrees. It doesn't open fully. There's like a little bit, just ever so slight, closed at the hinge versus completely flat. It does have a really nice big back display, which is almost the size of a standard phone. I'm trying to figure out what's this screen. 5.8 inch 1080p display on the back, but there's the fold hinge right there. And as you can see, just a degree or two left open, or closed, I should say, closed.
I would bet, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Like, look at
do it.
this.
What do you think about that?
That's on purpose because there's probably going to be some flex and stretch over time, and you'll have less of a crease. I wouldn't be surprised if that's by design. I'm not making excuses because I didn't have a chance to read this, but I could see that.
So it's hard to say because Ryan did say the crease is a little bit more noticeable on this than the recent Samsung phones.
Okay.
And the other thing is, he said when it was open in this position, it never felt secure in this position. Like there was just a little bit of wobble.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So he, he felt he was constantly checking it to see if it could open just a little bit more, and never did.
Huh.
Yeah. That's the thing. They really worked on thinness because, Marco, as you talked about, that's the trade-off with the Galaxy Z Fold series or the Flip series, is that because you have twice the display, when you fold it up, it gets real thick. They worked on keeping this very thin, so it's much thinner than a Z Fold 5. And I think Ryan felt in that compromise of trying to get that hinge mechanism as thin as possible as well. they had to, make some trade-offs there, and it doesn't quite open 100%. So interesting. But yeah, there you go. That's versus the Galaxy Z Fold 5. Oh, Fold 4, excuse me.
Yeah.
About the same size format,
Right.
exactly the same size format as the 5, actually. So yeah, you can see a little bit more horizontal versus vertical, which I like. What do you guys think?
See, I like it too. Looking at it, it's a little shorter, a little thinner, and you still get a big screen open. The issue is going to be now software's got to kind of be tuned for different dual display setups. It's just going to slow the industry down, and just, you know what I'm saying? You can't have every phone be exactly the same, but if your aspects aren't at least similar, it's just going to lead to weirdness with different apps and stuff.
Yeah. Well, especially if you think of the early Apple iPhones, they had literally the same resolution gen over gen. And then when they went to the higher Retina displays, they just quadrupled the resolution exactly. And that's kind of why they're still at weird resolutions on the iPhones. Because managing scaling is hard. And that is a challenge that Android phones have, regardless of even this issue. When you went to the taller aspect ratios and stuff, it's hard to plan for everything.
Yeah, what's interesting is that Ryan felt Samsung is currently doing a little bit better job with, having these larger screens, addressing the multi-app, multi-window interface better than Google did out of the gate. Now, this is their first folding phone. They're going to obviously have a few more cuts at it, and it's a great start. That's what Ryan felt. It was a great start. But has some catch up to do versus the refinement that is Samsung and frankly Motorola too. If you're talking about the Flip version, these are two major players that have had a lot of iteration on their foldables. So
Samsung's got to get credit for taking the plunge. They had the guts to blaze this trail. So they get to iterate more than the competition. Good stuff.
Yeah. And hopefully Google, now that they have, I guess, skin in the game with their own foldable device, maybe the Android ecosystem and interface and apps and whatnot will start coming along with the foldable era as well, making these screens more than just, a nice party trick. You need to really take advantage of them.
Which you'll get with newer apps moving forward, sure, but there's going to be a lot of legacy apps people depend on that maybe don't see development support anymore, and those are going to be, tough to adapt because there's not someone there to adapt it at a low level.
Right. Yeah. So there you go. There's the Pixel Fold, and here's the link to the Galaxy Z Flip 5 and Z Fold 5 hands-on that Miriam did. Folding phones have arrived, ladies and gentlemen. We now have critical mass on folding phones, and cool stuff. Why not have a new option in the marketplace for a little bit more screen real estate in your pocket? All right. Well, let's keep moving. Let's talk about some really large hard drives, and then we'll get into one that you reviewed. That's a solid state drive. But let's talk about Seagate's first HAMR drive. Seagate ships first HAMR hard drives, allowing monster 50 terabyte and larger capacities. What's HAMR stand for? I forget. I got to look that up. But it's
don't make me wing it. We got to look it up.
Yeah, I know, right? It's in the article. You can just read.
Heat assisted magnetic recording.
Thank you, sir. Well done. Way to dig on that quick. Yeah,
as opposed to conventional.
The heat's a feature.
Recording.
It's not a bug. It's a feature.
It's a feature. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a new type of media. It allows obviously for better areal density in the drive in each of the platters. And so when you talk about better areal density, you tend to get, at the same RPM, you tend to get a little bit better performance as well. But they're hard drives, they're bulk storage. Data center would love this, or perhaps somebody like Marco, who happens to be a movie aficionado, right?
I don't know. Like if you asked me before I reviewed that Solidigm SSD, I'd say hard drives have their place. After reviewing that Solidigm SSD, which is, an enterprise drive with about 8 cents a gigabyte. Yeah, it's twice the price of a hard drive, but it blows it away in every category. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, if you got the money, obviously, SS solid state's the way to go. But let's look at one other thing before we move to that, because I know you're itching to talk about that one. That's a cool product. Let's show a little something from the folks at Blackblaze. Back up your data ASAP if you own this capacity hard drive. And it's a study. Blackblaze has a data center business that they also do pretty good extensive detailing of drive reliability data. They're big on that. And here you can see the failure rate by drive size over time for the last 3 years, from 2020 to 2023, Q2 2023 to be exact. And as you can see, that red line, that 10 terabyte drive, right at around the second year, just went bazinga way up on the failure rate. And the 8 terabyte drive took off around kind of the same time. This took off as well. The other drives, the 4 and the 6 terabyte drives, they creeped up, but they kind of leveled off. And but you can see 8 and 10 terabyte is still bleeding edge when it comes to hard drive technologies. Never mind 50 terabyte, because as you can see, the failure rate, 12%, that's kind of high. Thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Yeah, that's the annualized failure rate. So,
annualized,
what percentage of drive, per year. So part of it is that the 8 and 10 terabyte drives are hitting that maturity point where they are starting to fail at this time. It's still kind of an alarmingly high rate. If we go down to this graph, it also includes the higher capacity 12, 14, and 16 terabyte drives.
Oh, neat.
Do need to keep in mind that those even higher capacity drives haven't reached the same level of maturity yet. So even though they're low now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to stay low as the drives see more use. But if anyone's going to put a drive through a lot of punishment and abuse, it is going to be Backblaze, because they are backing up so much data. They literally have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of drives that they go through, which also makes their study so fascinating to look at. But it will take time for, if these newer, higher capacity drives are going to have a higher failure rate, it's probably going to take some time to see them.
So anecdotally, right, I had a 7-drive NAS set up since like 2007 with 1 terabyte drives in it and never had a failure. I had a 4-bay NAS with 2 terabyte drives in it, never had a failure. My newer NAS boxes, one of them had 4 12 terabyte drives. I had a failure in the last few years, and the replacement I bought was dead. So I know Chris is probably 95% right about these larger, newer capacity drives not reaching that sort of EOL stage, or where they're weared out after a few years. But I do think that perhaps there was something in that range with the technology that they were able to get to 10, 12 gigabytes, perhaps that made them somewhat less reliable. But it's total anecdotal, but it's just multiple, and it's not just me. I had a friend with a similar situation with a similar size drive, and not really a client. I help a friend who's got an architecture office, and their server had a similar. So me just being paranoid now, I got to replace the drives in my NAS.
Regardless, our takeaway isn't to get you super paranoid about a 10 terabyte drive in particular, but just a reminder that drives do fail. And having a backup plan in place and working is a very important thing, no matter what drives you're using: solid state, mechanical hard drives, flash, thumb drives, whatever. If your data is just in one place, it kind of may as well not exist.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it, Chris. Yeah, it's pretty much could be gone at any given time, and you're crazy to leave yourself open to that. Yeah, no, I have. Interestingly enough, Marco, I have a 2-drive 3 terabyte NAS box that I've had for a while, for years, and it's been rock solid. I'm
Is that your Drobo?
About it, man. No, it's a Western Digital.
Gotcha.
I forget what it is. It's my whatever cloud version. I don't put it on the public cloud. They've had some I don't have public access to it. Remote, because they've had some security issues, but I don't need it, and it serves well for the file server here. But yeah, I'm itching to refresh because that thing's just been sitting around too long, sucking up dust.
I think just about every local cloud provider, Synology, QNAP, they've all had security problems at different points, and it's just kind of the nature of hooking something up to the internet. Is you really want that firewall in place and stuff, anyways. And if you don't need it to access the internet, don't.
Exactly.
Or if you do, just open it up long enough to get what you need and then close it right back up, because there's just not that much reason to have open access like that.
Yeah. The best security is to air gap it. Right. So, all right, well, let's stay in the storage vein. Why not? Right. We'll hop back out and talk about some other headlines we have too. But since we're talking storage and we're talking bodaciously large drives, Solidigm D5 P5, man, could they make this harder to say or what? 336 SSD review. How about some sexy names there, Solidigm? Solidigm, as you may know, is a spinoff of Intel's flash drive business, solid state drive business. And they are now continuing the legacy with some very high quality products. We've liked a lot of their stuff, and this is no different. This is a 61 terabyte SSD. It is monster, and it's pretty quick. And look at that capacitor. That's for power loss protection. It'll save your last write. Marco, tell us all about it.
I will. I just realized I grabbed the wrong one, but this is the form factor, that, what is it? The U.2 form factor. So yeah, this is kind of wild. So a few months ago, we looked at the D5P 5430, which was also a QLC based drive. That one had, was tuned slightly different, more for mixed environments. But the 5336, this is Solidigm's, I hesitate to say entry level, but it's for read heavy environments. It does also use QLC, but more it's the value alternative if you need bulk storage, right? And what's wild is in this same form factor, they've doubled capacity yet again. The 5430 is maxed out at 30.72 terabytes, sorry. And this doubles it. 61.44 is the max capacity in 2 of the 3 form factors being offered. And yeah, it's fundamentally very similar to the previous gen platforms from Solidigm. Performance peaks at about 6.5 to 7 gigs per second reads, depending on what kind of workload you're running. Writes top out at only 3.3, but again, they're targeting the drive for read heavy environments. So if you think of something like a Netflix, where they need tons and tons of storage that's just going to be streamed out for other people, this is like the perfect solution. And with that super high capacity, right? Like for years and years, what you've heard most people say is, all right, you get the smaller capacity SSDs where performance is paramount, and you get hard drives where you just need bulk, cheap storage. Mm-hmm. We're almost to the tipping point, right? Like SSD pricing, it's still not as cheap on a cost per gigabyte scale as a hard drive. But these drives, right, there's no street prices yet because the reviews just hit. But Solidigm is expecting them to come in less expensive than the 5316 series, which you can buy every day for 8 cents a gigabyte. So if, let's say, these are 6 cents a gigabyte in a few months, like, why would you ever buy another hard drive? Like, unless you needed a SATA interface, So yeah, just really, there's nothing stand out in terms of performance other than, it maintains performance really well under load, and it can almost saturate the PCIe 4 interface. But yeah, it's that max capacity, man. 61 terabytes in 2.5 inches. Pretty crazy.
yeah, man. And for folks that aren't familiar with the U2 interface, that's a good point, Marco, you made. PCI Express Gen 4 is the interface on this drive currently through the U2 drive form factor. That is server class form factors and its data center hardware, obviously, so built with reliability as well as speed and capacity in mind. Not to say that you couldn't put it in your workstation if you wanted to, or your your gaming desktop if you wanted to. You just need a PCI Express to U2 adapter card, right, Marco?
Yeah, I can't reach it right now, but they're $30 adapters, and you can plug them into any slot.
Yeah, into your PCI Express slot in your rig. Yeah, so there you go. And yeah, I'm looking at just about kissing 7 gigs a second read, and what's the writes? Looks
3.3 peak. 3.3.
That's not too bad for a big boy like that. My goodness.
Yeah, I mean the 5430 is just 3 gigs a second, right? So it's although again tuned for read centric environments, it's not like 3.3 gigs a second is slow,
Yeah. That's the
now, the caveat though is endurance with QLC is lower, so it's not bad. Like it's 0.58 drive writes. What's the heck is that? Whatever. I'm forgetting the acronym
endurance.
For the endurance rate.
Yeah, it's like drive writes per day. I think
0.58 drive writes per day. It peaks at like 65.2 petabytes written. So
petabytes, yeah.
It's still, yeah. I mean, that's a ton of data. No one's going to do that. I mean,
yeah.
Again, it's different in the data center and enterprise environments. But if you wanted to be nuts and just grab one of these off Amazon,
right? But if your workload is read driven, anyways, you're not writing as much data, and
exactly
endurance isn't as big a deal. Reads will put a little bit of wear on the drive, but not like a write does.
And
totally.
Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
No, I was going to say totally could see one of these drives or maybe even like a RAID 1 array in a workstation for like video production studio where, you're crunching, multi gigabyte, movie files, and terabyte movie files, all day long. So go ahead,
the only issue, well, two things. Going back to endurance for a second, if you remember years ago, the Tech Report did a endurance testing on a bunch of SATA SSDs, and like virtually every drive exceeds its endurance rating by miles, as long as there's no issues with their firmware. Those are conservative ratings anyway. But the one issue with using, data center drives in a workstation is they tend to fail differently than a consumer drive. A consumer drive, you'll start getting smart errors and it'll tell you it's going to fail. As soon as there's errors detected on a data center drive, they lock up. So you can't do anything with it anymore and you don't lose anything. But, if you don't care about that, like you can have, if this can't hold your Steam library, go outside.
You need to see the sun. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh goodness, that's hilarious. What's the rough cost on this thing if you do it per gigabyte, 8 cents a gigabyte, whatever it is?
So I don't have an actual number because Solidigm's expecting it to be cheaper than the 5316 series, and those are available at 8 cents a gigabyte. So it's probably going to be 6 to 7 cents a gigabyte once availability ramps.
You're looking at about $5,000.
Less than $5,000 for 60 terabytes. Yeah. And that sounds like a lot, but like hard drives aren't cheap either, but it's 10x cheaper,
So there you go. There's your next NAS array, Marco. A pair of those in RAID 1 and you're good. You're redundant. You're ready to rock.
It might be a backup, right? I just set up another NAS that if we want to talk about, Chris was right about making sure your data is in two places. Another issue that can happen, I have a 4-bay NAS and a separate one from my movie collection that is all of my hot hardware articles, all of my apps, all of my family photos, all that kind of stuff. And it had a firmware update come through and it hard reset itself. So I was I was lucky that it didn't blink the drive. I had to run through the initialization sequence to set it back up, but all my data was still there. Yeah. So I have a second one that I set up a few months ago, and now it's synced, but I hadn't synchronized them yet. So I'm good now. Now I just have to get offsite backup. But
so you have two NAS syncing. Are you doing that via the NAS interface or via a Windows utility?
Right now I'm hacking it with free file sync, but because they're both TerraMasters, I can have them sync with each other. Just haven't gone through the trouble of setting it up yet because it's only a couple terabytes of data. It's like 3 terabytes of data right now. Chris, what's the biggest hard drive right now? 20 terabytes or 18 terabyte?
Like that? I mean, I've got 18s in my NAS, but I know there's into the 20s at least on the market. Let me see.
So an 18 terabyte Seagate is $751. What is that per gigabyte?
18 terabyte?
18 terabyte, yeah, $751.
I don't know. That should be like 300.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
you're right. There's another one. See,
325.
Iron Wolf Pro. Oh, that's a 4-pack. Holy crap, that's a good price. $319. So 319 divided by 18,000. Yeah, it's not even 2 cents a gigabyte. So pricing's not quite there, obviously, for SSDs, but
yeah,
I don't know, man. The performance is pretty nice.
Yeah. Well, if you need the performance in the data center and the bulk storage, flash arrays are a real thing, and this gets the density up on the flash array dramatically. So they don't care.
Reds look like they're going up to 22 right now. See if I can pop that up.
Yeah. Interesting stuff for sure. Yeah, and actually, if you look at the data center math, they had a little comparison there, and then we'll move on. If you scroll down, Chris, on page 1, let me see. Yeah, the value versus all HDD array. I don't know how they came. Well, Marco, can you explain that a little bit? That chart?
Yeah, because so you that's with 20 terabyte hard drives, right? So essentially, you would need 3 hard drives per SSD, and when you factor in the cost of the drives plus the cost of the power,
right,
and you factor it out
energy,
and for a data center that can do 100 petabytes, you end up it's like half the price for the SSD setup. 47%
TCO.
TCO.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, right? Because it's
huge.
We don't think at that scale when you're talking about an enthusiast setup, but when you have to scale and you want the reliability and you have to worry about cooling them and power and all that kind of stuff, that's in the data center, that kind of shifts the paradigm, right? Just
the hardware
one generation back.
Small.
Yeah, like one gen back, it was half the capacity. We're talking a doubling of capacity in a few months. So that really shifts the conversation, at least in my mind, if you're, managing an environment like this.
Look at the rack footprint reduction.
Right.
That's
exactly
huge.
Yep.
Huge. 106 racks versus 9 racks is what they're saying. Wowzer. That makes data center folks real happy right there. Wow, cool.
There's only so many drive bays per server, like it's interesting.
Yeah, man. Good stuff. Solidigm D5 P5 336. Check out that review at Hot Hardware. Marco put it through his paces. Good looking drive with a ton of capacity. All right, let's keep clipping along here, and we'll get to some Radeon and Ryzen stuff. This was a news item that came through this week. AMD 4800S desktop kit repurposed from Xbox Series X and gets benchmarked in games. Interesting. So if you could rip out the guts and make your Xbox Series X just a good old fashioned PC, Windows PC, what could it do? And the folks at Digital Foundry put that together. And guys, thoughts on that? Is a very interesting little takeaway.
So I think this does have the GPU side of it disabled. So it's just the CPU port working, which is probably why it's not in an Xbox to begin with. But to still see the compute side is fascinating. One thing to keep in mind with this is it's actually using GDDR memory because it is intended to be used as an APU in there. And so while that gives it a ton of memory bandwidth, the latency becomes an issue with it. So you see here, the latency for the desktop kit versus a Ryzen 5 3600 is, almost 2x because of the GDDR memory. So this isn't necessarily something you would want to do, but it is something that's super fun to look at nonetheless. But you can see, I mean, they used it in a system to game. It's consistent, it's solid, it's competitive with other chips the generation. Obviously the 7600 50% advantage over it, just because it's newer architecture and all that. But yeah, very, very interesting to look at. And of course, depending on the game, some just aren't particularly optimized with it. But
yeah, Chris, I didn't get a chance to dig into this. How did they get it running Windows?
I'd have.
If you didn't dig into it, don't sweat it. Like,
yeah.
I just checked it out. That's interesting that first they were even able to pull this off.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, looking at the data, it was kind of a mix. Like in some scenarios, it was pretty quick. Some scenarios, it's more, you know, the Zen 2 nature and the higher latency really hold it back. But that's like one of those I would have loved to have had the time to experiment and pull that kind of stuff off. That looks fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's an x86 processor, so I don't
Yeah.
think there's any reason why it couldn't run Windows. I'm just looking to see if that's called out.
I'm sure it was. Had to be.
I don't see that Zach mentioned it.
Yeah.
By Control F. But you know, either way, I mean, gaming on Linux would be a similar situation. So
cool.
Just fun to see how similar consoles actually are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a little PC, you know, home theater PC for all intents and purposes that can game. Cool stuff. All right, and this is another thing that can game right here from the folks at Alienware, and then we're going to let Marco finish off with his Radeon Pro stuff that's coming up. Alienware's Aurora R16 gaming PC with radical redesign available now. There it is, the Aurora R16. That is a radical redesign. Chris, I don't know if you can scroll down to just the box instead of the Lord of the Rings kid there. There you go.
Lords of the Fallen.
Yeah. There you go. That is much more like a traditional box now. I do like the legend, you know, what looks like a little side piping there.
Loop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But very traditional, much smaller, you know, mini, not mini tower, but maybe a small mid tower case design now.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there?
36 liters external volume now, which it used to be 60 something. So it's a lot smaller on the outside. I think it's the same steel case, or, you know, maybe some minor tweaks to it as the chassis itself. But, you know, the plastic shell that they had on there to give it the really out of this world look, they've stripped that off, and, you know, kept the stadium loop lighting on the front. Improved the airflow significantly, nothing obstructing coming out of the 240 mil radiator exhaust, more room to breathe in front through the sides. It seems like they've done a lot in the right direction, responding to criticisms that the lineup has received. You know, depending on your configuration, it wasn't always an issue before with the older design. But as you started pushing in the really top hardware in there, yeah, I mean, you get 22 liters or so on the interior, and when you're adding stuff obstructing the airflow, it can be an issue when you're particularly pushing it. So if you can make it simpler, still have a distinctive design, and get better performance, lower volumes, and better temperatures out of it, I think it's a really great move.
Yeah, James Campbell asked, it's basically a Chinese system, isn't it? And it's been packed together a little bit. You know, I'm not sure where the engineering was done. I know Dell does a lot of engineering right in Austin, Texas, especially the mechanical design. But I'm going to drop in my Aurora R15 review. That iteration of the Aurora, I think, fixed a lot of those thermal issues. Okay, you have the perforated front now that lets ventilation through. You have a perforated side panel, which you didn't have before. I actually really liked the Aurora R15 personally, and I didn't observe thermal problems. I didn't observe much fan noise, and I didn't observe things overheating too much. So, you know, I wasn't. I know some folks were turned off from the previous iterations, but I think Dell got it right on the R15, and then the R16 just takes it in a completely different direction. So I don't know how I feel about it. I really kind of liked. I was probably the minority, I guess, but I kind of liked the Aurora style of old, and now that they got the kinks worked out. Go ahead, Marco.
I have opinions. The over the top whining for the previous gen was a little too much. It's, yes, you could criticize every system, and yes, some of the criticism was, you know, absolutely deserved. But if you take one of those Alienware rigs, they probably sell 100-fold of them versus the boutique builders that get everything perfectly right. And to have that kind of scale, you have to be able to build them fast enough and sell them fast enough, and you're not going to do that if you have to support them because they're overheating or something's wrong. So you have to look at the whole picture. If you nitpick a couple of systems and look at benchmark and thermal details, yes, all right, perhaps it performs worse than a perfectly built boutique system in some scenarios, but they sold tons of them, and they weren't like returned in these crazy volumes. And taking that macro scale view, they're not bad systems, and they have simply gotten better with each iteration. In terms of this new design, I'm a minimalist kind of guy, so I like it. Right, I think that looks cool. And if it performs better and it's quieter and lots of the issues that were publicly voiced are addressed, then they're probably going to sell a whole bunch of these too.
Yeah. I mean, you can see the inside's almost all blacked out. There's some of these blue tabs here, which they use across all of Dell's systems to mark, okay, users can take this and remove this component here.
I really like what they do with that. Yeah.
But it's small. And you get some of the unpainted frame here where the side panel sits in, but your side panel is going to be in place. You're not going to see it. I am curious to see what it looks like from the back. They didn't really have any images to see if the IO area is unpainted or not. I'm imagining it is unpainted, which I wish would be. I'm set up with my desk, so the back of my system actually faces the door as you walk in. So, it is something that you may think, okay, as I'm sitting here, I don't see it. But depending on how your room, your office is set up, that is something that could be part of the aesthetic in ways you don't expect. But overall, it's a lot simpler. I think they've improved the airflow by around 50% by their numbers. So it should be very interesting once we can get one in here to test and see just how it performs. Still has, stock memory speeds. Again, that kind of comes into the having to support so many systems situation. They're not doing RAM overclocking yet, but they have had RAM overclocking in systems in the past. It's something that could come to this system. I just wouldn't buy it on that promise. Wait until it happens if that is a deal breaker for you. We probably should do a more recent analysis of how much your RAM speeds really impact gaming. So we can definitively say if it's just 1 or 2%, maybe you don't care. If it's a 15% difference in a game, okay, maybe that's an issue, but we need to probably put that to the test and see what it comes to. And yeah, otherwise, pretty good looking system.
Yeah, again, and Tim Pod Diddy Sweezy there, buddy. Good to see you. He says it rips away the aesthetics that make Alienware PC stand out. I'm kind of that mindset, but I haven't seen this system yet, so I got to give it its due. I may get hands on it someday and go, wow, or I may be like, yeah, just another box. I don't know.
The side lighting looks exactly like the back of the notebooks.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is their signature design, and it's even in the R15. If you look at the center of the intake, you have that stadium loop there too. The only thing that bugs me is this lighting is not on the right side.
Yeah.
I
would want the piping on the front too. Why not throw the piping on the front too? Bring it up
maybe we can get some hexagonal cutouts in the front panel as well for a little more airflow. But I'm sure this design will continue to evolve, because even with the last one, when they had a new design, they tweak it over the next few generations and make improvements. And I think
you go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm saying I think this is a good first effort with the probably the most dramatic design they've had in 10 generations or so. And I'm sure this one will continue to evolve as well.
Yeah. And you do have some front airflow through that
through the sides
loop. Yeah, the side loop, kind of up front corner. Cool stuff from the folks at Alienware. Let's wrap up and get Marco's Radeon Pro article teed up here, because this was something very interesting this week. Good to see the folks at AMD back in the pro-vis game once again, driving product launches in that space. AMD Radeon Pro W7600 and W7500 review, value-driven pro-vis graphics. Easy for me to say. Pro-vis, professional visualization is what that stands for. And if you are a creator, a designer, and you need workstation class graphics firepower with ISV certification and independent software developer certifications on high-end apps, design apps, rendering, all that good stuff, you need the kind of battle-tested support of a pro-vis graphics card, and that's what the market these address at $429 and $599. Pretty cheap, pretty inexpensive for pro-vis cards. Marco, what'd you think?
So I thought they were pretty cool. Here's the W7600. So you see a nice single slot compact design.
Thin.
Yeah, it's thin, and it's actually quiet. If you there's data on the last page with thermals and fan speeds. Fans only spin up to like 3,000 RPM under load, and so both of the cards are based on Navi 33. So the same GPU that's on the Radeon RX 7600 that launched back in April or May, I think it was. And it's a big step up over the previous gen. At least the 7600 is. AMD did something interesting with this. The two cards address two totally different market segments, although they're based on the same chip. So the 7600 is the full implementation of Navi 33. So 2048 cores in there. It's using, both cards are 8 gigs of memory, but this is where they hugely diverge. So the 7500, the lower end of the two cards, is scaled back to 1792 cores, and it's only using 11 gigabit per second speed memory linked over 128-bit interface. The 7600 is using 16, or I'm sorry, is it 16 or 18? Let me double check. It's either 16 or 18 gigabit per second speed memory over the same interface. What that does, though, is it really lowers power on the 7500. So the 7500 has no extra power requirements. It's completely powered by the slot. It's only a 70-watt board. And the 7600 is a 130-watt board, right? It's nearly double. And if you look through the benchmarks, what you see is they kind of sandwich the previous gen W6600. The new Radeon Pro W7600 is clearly faster across the board at right about the same power levels. So clearly more efficient, definitely more performance on tap. The 7500, it trails most of the time. With the newer gen ray tracing, it's better for for DXR workloads. If you're a VR developer and you're going to use ray tracing, it might be a little better there. For traditional raster, even though technically the 7500 has more compute capability than the 6600, that really low memory bandwidth holds it back in a lot of situations. So you're talking a peak of 173 gigabytes per second on the 7500 versus 288 on the 7600. And the W6600 lands right about in the middle, 224 gigabytes per second. And if you look at the numbers, they really kind of end up sandwiching that, right? W7500 is usually a little slower, 7600 much faster. But overall, if you want a quiet, low power, not crazy expensive, modern graphics card with all the latest features like AV1 encoding, these are a solid choice for content creators or professional developers that work with 3D graphics, things like that.
Interesting stuff, and forgive my association with consumer grade product, but is it safe to say that the W7600 is roughly a Radeon RX 7600? Or okay, so that's what I figured, and the 7500 is just a notch down from that. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Same clocks too?
No, so the clocks are lower than consumer cards, so it won't catch a 7600 if you're using it strictly to game, but they're not really meant for that. They're the only game benchmark I have in there is VR Mark and DXR, the DXR test from a 3D Mark. But the other thing that's interesting to note is if you look at all of the graphs now, if you step up one notch, right, to the 7800, huge increase in performance.
Yeah.
Even the previous gen 6800 is a massive increase in performance, but they are way more expensive. You go from hundreds to thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
But, if you have the budget, the higher end cards are just massively overpowered versus these mainstream cards. But still, like there's clearly a market for these cards. You can get, professional workstations with all those ISV certifications without needing a crazy power supply, right? And you get all of the benefits in terms of features. They're just not big honking GPUs that can, crush a ton of pixels.
You don't need a $22,000 system like it's sitting right next to me.
Right, exactly. Oh, I need a label, Dave, to get that card back to Chris, by the way.
Okay, fair enough. We'll send it back to HP. It'll be okay.
Well, when they ask.
Is it HP or is it Dell? I forget.
HP.
Okay. Yeah, we cannibalized a system in-house so that Marco had some comparison numbers to work with.
So I should mention I already tested the W7900 and W7800 because obviously you see the 7800 in those graphs. Am I able to share my screen from here,
hit
guys?
share at the bottom.
Yeah.
Let me. I don't want to give away the whole review, but people are probably going to be interested in how this compares to NVIDIA, and unfortunately, in the mainstream, haven't gotten my hands on one of NVIDIA's mainstream Quadros or RTX cards, but at the high end, we were lucky enough to do some comparisons. And the W7900,
zoom in there, buddy, if you can. Sorry,
zoom in a little more.
Yeah. There you go.
The 7900 dominates the Ampere generation A6000. This is not the Ada generation. They're not kind of shipping in volume yet. So Luxmark, it's the A6000 is about on par with the 7800. And you see that a lot through cryptography. I'm not going to zoom in on all of them because I don't want to give away the review. But image processing, AMD, even Indigo Bench, which is like an NVIDIA benchmark, it trades bloats with the 7900. Blender is really the most interesting. Is AMD with Blender 3.6. I think it's called HIP. I probably have that wrong. But it's not quite as fast as NVIDIA using optics, but it's not this gigantic gap that NVIDIA used to have in Blender. The 7900 is right behind it. In ViewPerf, the new cards, they dominate. Now, this is interesting. Decode, NVIDIA's got the dual decoders, and A6000, it crushes.
Yes. So one thing, Marco, try running that Blender on the A6000 with CUDA just to see how it compares. With some of the tests I was running, the CUDA rendering was actually even faster than the optics.
Really?
Which, it surprised me because optics used to be way faster, hands down. But it may depend on the particular engine you're using, Cycles versus EV versus whatever.
Oh, okay. I got to check that out. So DXR, NVIDIA obviously with the lead there, and VR Mark back to a couple of wins for AMD, and power, lower power than an A6000. So, 48 gigs and 32 gigs in the 7800 and 7900. They are beasts. The see if I can pick it up. 7900, big boy.
There you go.
Look at that bracket.
That's a little bit more like a Radeon 7900 XT.
Yeah, that's thick with two C's. But we that review will definitely be up early this coming week if you're interested in that.
Stick around for Marco's latest and greatest hits. James Gamble, SGI, eat your heart out. Silicon Graphics. Remember them?
Yep. Oh yeah, I got a bunch of pictures from VCF of a bunch of SGI systems.
That's going back.
Here's that power, by the way, showing the W7500, just how efficient that is.
Yeah. That's good stuff. That you can appreciate for sure.
Especially at scale.
Yeah, well, or sitting in a hot workstation next to you when you're trying to work all day and stay cool. Cool. Good stuff. Yeah, you know that, Marco, right?
Yeah. So for everybody watching, my office is in an addition that has a flat roof and no ventilation. So when it's hot outside, it's hot in here.
You roast. Yeah. But see, we sweat and toil for you folks all over the internet just to bring our coverage to you at hothardware.com, where you can find us on the web. We will wrap up now. That's what I'm about to do, guys, as you can tell. Find us on the web at hothardware.com, twitter.com/hothardware, youtube.com/hothardware, Facebook as well. We're everywhere. Hit thumbs up, like, and subscribe so you get notified when we go streaming. We will now be Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern. That is our new time slot. and we just figured it was a little bit easier to get together ourselves usually, and also maybe easier for folks on a Friday lunch break to
and if you can't
hang out
catch
with
us
the
live,
geeks.
it gives you something over the weekend to dive into.
Right. You can always catch the VOD that comes up immediately on YouTube. Absolutely. And so, yeah, hit thumbs up, subscribe so you get notified when we go live next. And it was a pleasure to have you with us today. And we thank you for stopping by. Have a great weekend.